Hello, and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Actuary Podcast. I'm your host, Brock Talby, the Fantasy Football Actuary. So, we will just get right into it. We will start with the Thursday night throwback. This is a segment where I'm just going to take a look at the Thursday night football game. So, it was super exciting to have football back. I was super excited, looked forward to it all day. The game was good. The Texans came out pretty flat. I didn't think they looked very good, except for my boy, David Johnson. Is it too early to take a victory lap week one? I do not think so. I love the way he looked. He only got 11 carries, but 77 yards on the ground, another 32 through the air, and a touchdown. That 19-yard touchdown run looked fantastic. And this is why I had him ranked in the top 10 in all formats. I think I had him 8 in standard and 5th in PPR, and which was a lot higher than most of the other analysts in the industry, most of the consensus rankings that I was looking at. I was a lot higher on David Johnson than most people, and this is why. I just think he has all the opportunity in the world, and he looked good. Duke Johnson actually went down with a sprained ankle, so if he misses any time, I mean, they're just going to keep leaning on David Johnson even more. So, besides him, the Texans didn't look that sharp. I assume this is a consequence of no preseason. I didn't think Deshaun Watson looked that good. He got a rushing score at the end in garbage time to kind of salvage his fantasy day, but other than that, he didn't look that good to me. His wide receivers looked miserable except for Will Fuller. Will Fuller looked pretty good, and he had like a 35% target share. Kenny Stills looked bad. Cooks is obviously injured. Randall Cobb, I don't think he was on the field until the last two snaps, pretty much, or the last two plays. He made two catches at the end of the game, but other than that, irrelevant. So it was just kind of David Johnson, and when they went down big, I mean, David Johnson didn't get the work second half, but I think once they start clicking, David Johnson will get more work and he'll do a lot with it. Um, on the other side of the ball, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he didn't look otherworldly to me, but I think he's going to be a stud because he's on the Chiefs. Um, when I watched Kareem Hunt's first game as a rookie with the Chiefs a couple years ago, I was wowed. He looked super good. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he didn't look like some super crazy talent to me, but he looked good, and I think he'll be good just because he's on the Chiefs. Um, a lot of people are commenting on his goal line work that he didn't get it done inside the five. I'm not really worried about that because the opportunity is there. Obviously, if he's getting 6 goal line carries in a single game, um, I saw a crazy stat that Le'Veon Bell had 7 goal line carries all of last year. So if Clyde's getting that much work, I think he's going to be good for fantasy. He's obviously going to be a stud. He's probably going to be worth that first round pick. So, moving on from the Thursday night game, we will get into the NFL newsstand. We will start with DeAndre Hopkins and Kareem Hunt both got contract extensions. Um, DeAndre Hopkins, I think, becomes the highest paid on an annual basis that's not a quarterback. So he's the highest paid player that's not a quarterback on an annual basis now. And Kareem Hunt gets an extension with the Browns for 13 million, a little under 14 million for a 2-year extension. I know I'm a Kareem Hunt owner in my reality sports online league, which is basically like a dynasty type setup. I went all in on Kareem Hunt this year in the free agency auction because I was anticipating him going somewhere else next year and maybe being the one. This kind of puts a damper on that, but at the same time, if they're willing to give him an extension, they're obviously planning on using him, even if he's in a 50-50 split with Nick Chubb. I think he could be useful. But yeah, it's kind of a damper on the dynasty outlook for Kareem Hunt over the next few years, where he could have been the free agent at the end of this year. He could have been a stud and a number one somewhere else. Looking at a little coach speak, so Mike Tomlin says James Conner is the unquestioned bell cow, and Bruce Arians says Fournette is picking up Tampa's offense very quickly and will have a solid role in week one. James Conner, unquestioned bell cow. This isn't that big of a surprise. Tomlin's always used a bell cow type of running back. That's what he likes to do. He doesn't like having multiple backs on the field at once. I think the biggest thing with James Conner is staying healthy. This I didn't question the workload necessarily when he's healthy. I kind of avoided James Conner in drafts because of his health concerns. Um, if he can stay healthy, though, that's great, and the people that drafted him will be very happy. I'm not really buying Fournette having a solid role in week one. He might get 6 to 8 carries, and he has some touchdown upside, but I think Ronald Jones is going to be the starter. I think he's going to get more work in week one at least. Um, Fournette might work into it, and I still see an even split, even if Ronald Jones starts getting more work the first few weeks, and then Fournette works into it, and he has more work near the end of the season. I just think it's going to be too much of a split to rely on either of those guys. Moving on to another coach, Pete Carroll says that Seattle will imply a hot hand approach between Carson and Hyde. Um, this is why I avoided Carson leading up to the season. I didn't like that they signed Hyde. I didn't like that for Carson. I don't know if they were worried about his health, but Hyde was 1,000 yard rusher last season, and I think he's going to cut into Carson's workload on a lot more consistent basis than Penny ever did. So Pete Carroll saying this, I know that Chris Carson's still probably the guy, but even him saying this just kind of worries me and kind of reinforces that fear that I had for Carson when they signed Hyde. Jacksonville offensive coordinator Jay Gruden says that rookie James Robinson will start week one and can handle the workload. I think this is just kind of trying to build James Robinson up. Obviously, Jacksonville doesn't really have any other options with Armstead on the COVID list and Ozigbo on the IR now. They really just have James Robinson and then Chris Thompson, who's a pass catching specialist. So James Robinson's the starter. He's going to get most of the carries, but I'm not going to play him in week one against Indy. And I think they're going to be down a lot against Indy. So even if he's getting a majority of the carries, how many carries is he really going to be getting when they're playing catch up? Moving on, the Patriots coaching staff believes Cam can be the runner of yesteryear, which would make him a really good draft value for where he was going for QB. I think his ADP was like QB 13 or something. Back in 2017, he ran 139 times for 754 yards. So if the Patriots are planning on him getting that kind of rushing workload, obviously he's going to be a stud QB. Rushing yards are so invaluable to the quarterback position. Obviously, we saw what Lamar Jackson did last year. He was far and away the number one quarterback because of his rushing baseline. So if Cam can get even over 500 rushing yards, he's going to be a stud QB, and he's going to be a steal for where people drafted him. And we'll actually talk about Cam a little bit later. So rounding out the NFL newsstand section, we'll go through some injury updates. The biggest questionable tag going into the weekend for me is Miles Sanders. Peterson says it is possible he could have a managed workload in week one. And I think this is why you saw him start falling down draft boards near the start of the season. He got injured during camp, and he's been limited and questionable since. So having him listed as questionable and Peterson saying that he could have a managed workload in week one, it's not good. If you drafted him, you're probably stuck playing him. And if I had him on any of my teams, I would probably still play him, especially since it's against Washington. But I'm not feeling good about this, and hopefully he can get back to healthy by week 2. So within the next couple of weeks. If not, man, his draft price was so high that if he doesn't get healthy, it's going to really damage some fantasy teams. Moving on, Cortland Sutton has a sprained AC joint and is day-to-day, but he looks dicey for Monday Night Football. I don't expect him to play. It sounds like he's not really doing anything in practice. And with that Monday Night Football time slot, there's no way you can gamble on having Sutton in your lineup. I would just take him out. For San Francisco, Deebo Samuel is out and Brandon Ayuk is questionable. Kenny Golladay is doubtful for week 1 and will be replaced by Marvin Hall, most likely. This hurts Stafford, who I'm a big fan of, but it really helps Marvin Jones. If you drafted Marvin Jones in the seventh, eighth, ninth round, you have a week one starter and a stud. So you're feeling good about that, but you're not feeling as good about Stafford. And if you spent a second or third round pick on Kenny Galladay, you're obviously very displeased. Mike Evans is also doubtful for week one. He's dealing with a soft tissue issue, I think. It may be a hamstring. Um, this is not good either. I know a lot of people were ranking Evans really high. I wasn't ranking him high at all going into the season. I think I had him at wide receiver like 20 ish. I think Chris Godwin is better suited to what Tom Brady likes to do. And with Tom Brady's older age, I think the shorter passes to Chris Godwin were more on the likely side than airing it out deep to Mike Evans to begin with. So, but people took Mike Evans really early, and him being out week one kind of sucks for them. David Montgomery is now practicing in full, but I think he's a risky play, and he is listed as questionable. I'm looking elsewhere. I have David Montgomery, as I went over in the last episode over my teams. I have David Montgomery in my Reality Sports Online League. And as my third starting running back position, I have to choose between Montgomery, Cam Akers, and Antonio Gibson. Spoiler alert, I'm not picking Montgomery. I'm not playing Montgomery. Who I am picking, I will go over shortly and later on in the episode. Jalen Reagor is also practicing in full, which is great news for the Philadelphia rookie. This also helps Carson Wentz. I still think Deshaun Jackson is a smash play week one. If you drafted Jackson later in your rounds, I think he definitely needs to be in your lineup in week one still. This makes it gives Carson Wentz more options having Jalen Reagor as well, but which is just good for Wentz in general. But him being a rookie, I still think he's going to rely on Deshaun Jackson a lot. So I would play Deshaun Jackson, and you could probably play Jalen Reagor as a flyer if you're really hurting for depth. Maybe you drafted Galladay or Mike Evans who aren't playing, and you need to start Jalen Reagor. You could do worse than Jalen Reagor for sure. Darrell Henderson looks good to go for week one, which adds even more of a split to the Rams backfield. Malcolm Brown, Darrell Henderson, and Cam Akers. I don't know. I have no idea who to pick. I think Malcolm Brown will probably lead in carries in week one. I'm hoping Cam Akers can take over as the season goes on. But I probably would stay away from Henderson and Akers this week, and maybe you could play Malcolm Brown. I know the Rams really like Malcolm Brown. He'll probably lead in carries. So just for that, you could play Malcolm Brown. Out of the three, that's who I would play. For the New York Giants, Golden Tate is questionable, and I would say stay away this week. I projected Tate as the number one. I know a lot of people projected Sterling Shepard as the number one for this team for the season, and some people even went with Darius Slayton. I think Golden Tate is the number one for this year for Daniel Jones. They paid him as the number one receiver. They paid him to be there as the guy. I know Sterling Shepard's going to be good too. He's going to be really involved, and Slayton's a great player. I just think Tate is going to be slightly above those guys, and I think he'll lead the wide receiver core throughout the season. But for week one, he's practicing at a really limited basis. Even if he plays, I'm not playing him. Denzel Mims is out for week one for the New York Jets, but Rashad Perriman is in. So I don't know if anyone was planning on playing Denzel Mims anyways as a rookie wide receiver for Sam Darnold against the Buffalo Bills. But Rashad Perriman's an option if you really feel lucky. I wouldn't play him. All right. So this is kind of the segment I've been teasing. This is kind of going to be the main segment on the Saturday episodes. It's called Fringe Player Frenzy. So it's kind of like I'm picking my favorite fringe player starts or someone who I'm ranking higher than the consensus based on what I've seen online. This is a guy, I'm going to go through quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. And these are guys that I have pretty high, and you might have drafted later in your draft. They probably were drafted as backups or your third or fourth running back or wide receiver. And I'm saying I'm starting these guys this week if I have them. And you should really consider starting them. So, Fringe player frenzy. We will start with the quarterback position, and we will go with Cam Newton. I think I have him ranked in my top 5 this week. Um, it's not surprising. Miami graded out last season as the worst defense overall, and worst pass rush according to Pro Football Focus, which should allow Cam to kind of ease in and get comfortable with the Patriots schemes. And it's a good starting first game. It should be low pressure for him. Um, and if the Patriots believe he can be a runner, which we talked about earlier, I think even a base of like 35 to 40 rushing yards kind of vaults him into the top 5. Couple that with Miami surrendered the ninth most passing yards and the sixth most rushing yards per game last year. So I think the Patriots are going to have to rely on Cam. I think he's going to be their playmaker, and I think he's going to account for a lot of those yards this week. I like him as a top 5 QB. I'm playing him. I'm playing him over, yeah, basically every other quarterback not named Patrick Mahomes, which already played on Thursday. So you already have him in your lineup. Lamar, Russell Wilson, and I can't remember who I have fourth, but let's check here. Oh, nope, that's it. So, and then Cam Newton. I have Cam Newton as fourth. So play Cam Newton. Be confident in Cam Newton. I am. We'll move on to the running back position. If you listen to the first episode, you know that I am very high on Antonio Gibson, and he is my running back choice this week. A lot of people drafted him as the 3rd or 4th, or maybe even 5th if you drafted really early, the 5th string running back on their teams. I like Antonio Gibson this week. The matchup doesn't look super good. Philly gave up the 3rd fewest rushing yards per game last year and was graded 10th against the run by Pro Football Focus. But I don't think Gibson's going to be a typical rusher. He was in wide receiver meetings as well for Washington throughout camp, and obviously he only had 33 carries in college. They used him as a receiver in college as well. I expect Washington to use him as a running back and to line up outside as a wide receiver. I just think he's going to be a good playmaker. He's a good football player. And when you have a weapon like Antonio Gibson, that athletic and that much of a beast, I think Washington's just going to use him. I'm projecting a fairly even split between rushing and receiving for him. I think his playmaking ability and speed will just make things happen. Also, there's no NFL tape on him, and nobody can scout for him, so Washington's coaching staff can use him in creative ways that could surprise in week 1. Philly obviously can't scheme him out of the game because they don't really know how Washington's going to use him, which I think is a good thing when you have an athlete the caliber of Antonio Gibson. I have him ranked as a low-end running back 2 or a high-end running back 3. I think he's perfect for the flex spot this week. And when I was talking about on my team, I'm choosing between Montgomery, Akers, and Antonio Gibson for that 3rd running back slot. I'm picking Antonio Gibson. I'm playing Antonio Gibson over David Montgomery and Cam Akers. So that's kind of where I have him in the rankings. Like I said, that low-end running back 2, that high-end running back 3 this week. So for my wide receiver spot, I'm going with Stephon Diggs. I know a lot of people drafted him as their third wide receiver. I think he was going pretty late, 6th, 7th, maybe even slipped to the 8th round in your league. So he would have been drafted as a bench player for you, but I am saying start him. I have Diggs ranked as a top 5 wide receiver this week. Just think about it. Who on the Jets is going to stop him? There's no Jamal Adams anymore, which makes the Jets secondary 100% less scary to me. And Buffalo brought Stephon Diggs in to be Josh Allen's go-to threat on the outside. They needed that deep, fast playmaking guy, and they went out and got Stephon Diggs for Josh Allen. Diggs is always one of the highest graded wide receivers in Matt Harmon's reception perception and scores crazy high success rates on every type of route compared to the rest of the league. I really just think he's a stud, and if you drafted him as your wide receiver 3 or 4, I like him as a wide receiver 1 this week. I would put him in, unless you have like Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams and Julio Jones or something. If you have all 3 of those guys, yeah, obviously you're playing those 3 guys, but I like the upside of Stephon Diggs. I think the Bills are going to crush the Jets. And I think some of those points, a lot of those yards, are going to come from a couple deep shots from Josh Allen showing off his shiny new weapon. And moving on to the tight end spot, I am going with Jack Doyle. So this is the first time in the last couple years that he is the clear starter for Indy. And they're playing a terrible Jacksonville defense. Philip Rivers is an upgrade at quarterback, especially for Doyle because Rivers has historically used his tight end a lot in short yardage situations where they need to pick up a third down. Philip Rivers likes to look for his tight end. He also likes to look for him around in the red zone. So I think Jack Doyle might not have even been drafted in your league, but I think the matchup and his new QB situation makes him a great starting option in week one. If you're streaming the tight end position, if you went late tight end and you just picked up a couple flyers, you didn't get the Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews, you picked up Chris Herndon and Ian Thompson or something like that. I think you should pick up Jack Doyle and play him instead this week. I think I have him ranked at tight end 7. Let me check this. Yes, tight end 7 in half point PPR. So I would play Jack Doyle with confidence. I think he has a good shot at getting in the end zone. And I think Rivers is going to use him, and they just have a fantastic matchup. So that wraps up the Fringe Player Frenzy. I know I just focused on one guy per position. That's going to be kind of the style that I go for in these Saturday episodes, just kind of focusing on fringe players that after I get my rankings set, I'm going to look at who I have higher than the consensus, why I have them higher, why I believe they should be higher than the consensus, and why I think you should be starting them with confidence. So I'm going to go through each one of those. If there's players that you have questions about that I don't talk about, you can look up my rankings for free on my website. It's thefantasyfootballactuary.com. So my weekly rankings will be updated there all the way through game time on Sundays, and they're free. I have different formats. I have standard, half point PPR, and full point PPR. I also have 4-point quarterback and 6-point quarterback. I have flex rankings and defense and kicker rankings as well. So all of that's for free on the website. Just check it out, thefantasyfootballactuary.com. And while you're at it, feel free to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at theFFActuary. And Facebook, I have the Fantasy Football Actuary set up as a page. If you like video podcasts, you can check me out on YouTube as well, the Fantasy Football Actuary. So I'm there as well. So let's enjoy the weekend together. I'll be tweeting updates about the games. I'll be tweeting updates about injuries and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely follow me on Twitter for updates. And let's just enjoy the season together. The start of week 1 was awesome on Thursday night. Let's keep it going with Sunday and then 2 games on Monday night. It's going to be a wild ride. I will be back here on Tuesday. Until then, good luck in your fantasy week 1 and have fun. That's the most important thing with fantasy football, really, is to have fun and trash talk the crap out of your league. All right. See you on Tuesday.